The promenade, the people walking, the people talking. Facade, what do you want? Believe in my eyes are wide and open.
Why do we need small conversations about big issues?
For the 50th anniversary of the Misuse of Drug Act 1971, we really want to encourage conversation around drug reform and what this could and should look like in the UK. Through small conversations, we can educate those around us and perhaps change their perspectives on drugs. In this video, I will briefly talk about why the Act has been ineffective and why talking to each other about this big issue can help us change this outdated piece of legislation. So why has the Misuse of Drug Act been ineffective? Well, when it was implemented, it was intended to decrease consumption of drugs by just completely banning their presence in any form within any of our supply chains. In 1971, the existing evidence and rhetoric in the political landscape meant that society as a whole felt that this was an appropriate way of dealing with the issue. However, it's become really, really clear over the past 50 years that this complete blanket ban is not effective at all. And in fact, it's causing more harm to those involved. Public health campaigns are just not as effective and beneficial to people who are struggling, and it exacerbates social inequalities for those who are struggling. And when we do look deeper into the issue, it becomes clear that the most marginalised groups are affected the worst. People from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, people who are racially minoritised, members of the LGBTQ+ community, women, the list goes on. They are more greatly impacted by the consequences of drug use as well. Domestic violence, HIV/AIDS, not to ignore the impact of intergenerational trauma, which can lead to drug addictions being perpetuated in younger generations too. But it's really, really important to note why people are using and abusing drugs of all kinds in the first place. In Johann Hari's Chasing the Scream, he talks about the experiments conducted by Bruce Alexander, which actually show that addiction is an adaptation. It's not you, it's the cage or the environment that you live in. What becomes really clear from this is that we need more systemic changes. We need changes that get people out of poverty, provide people with better support, not just with drug addiction, but with proper social support, and that we decolonize and, make sure that our systems aren't institutionally racist. We need to make people feel included. We need to make people feel safe, and we need to provide people with support. If people are given the option to be happy and have happy, healthy lives, they will take it. As a society, we have to be able to provide them with that. And in the interim period where we can't, or we're in the process of trying to figure that out, we have to give them places where they can practice safe harm reduction and not bear judgment on them for doing so. But the government over the past 50 years have refused to change the legislation. They've refused to listen to new and evolving evidence. They've refused to listen to what is best for those suffering the most. They haven't used context-specific data with their approach. They haven't looked into even asked marginalised groups who are affected by blanket bans on drugs. They have focused on a more top-down vertical approach rather than a bottom-up approach. Top-down meaning that, they are exerting control over us rather than people actually having an impact and place within policy-making decisions. This way they can gatekeep information from the public and they don't have to be held accountable to us either. So what can we as individuals do to improve the state of drug reform legislation? We can do this in numerous ways. We can continue to lobby our MPs, our governments through writing, signing petitions, and engaging in discourse around the topic. But we also need to change our social norms. As we've discussed earlier, how society views and perceives issues around drug reform is imperative to how we stigmatise and view those who use drugs, particularly those part of racially minoritized communities. And we can play our part by talking about these issues with those around us to destigmatize them. Conversations around race and drug reform can be really, really difficult and challenging. And sometimes those conversations don't have a visible impact in a way that we would like to see them. And sometimes you might even have backlash. But know that even if these things do happen, you could have got some of the cogs starting to turn in someone's mind about these topics, which is their knowledge or a thought process that they might perhaps share with someone else. They might have an intellectual conversation with another family member that they know. Don't underestimate the impact a conversation can have on a person. It can be quite transformative for them, even if we don't see that ourselves.
So what can we do to have these small conversations? Have small conversations with people that you trust or in spaces that you trust. Understand that not everyone is on the same page. We have to meet people where they are. Nothing is set in stone. People can change, perspectives can change, conversations can be transformative, and you never know which ones are the most effective. And lastly, make sure you debrief with people that you trust after having difficult conversations. They can provide new perspectives on a conversation that's felt stubborn and quite difficult. Thank you for watching.